Good evening, folks. Our participants are gradually joining us, so we're going to wait until we sort of get everyone on board. I do want to welcome you tonight to this Inclusive Education Canada webinar. We're pleased to have guests with us who will provide, I think, useful information about Montessori education and inclusion. And we're going to have a conversation. We're not giving lectures tonight. We're going to have a discussion among the people that you see on your screen. And we hope to take as many questions from participants as we can as we move along through the program. So the number of participants seems to have paused at this point, so I'm going to feel free to move on. I'll remind everybody that we scheduled this for 75 minutes, an hour and a quarter, and we want to make sure that we're able to do everything that we set out to do. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Gordon Porter, the Director of Inclusive Education Canada. And our organization tries to promote inclusion in schools all across the country. And we do that by working with families, with parents, and with professionals, people who work in public education and in Montessori education, as well as academics and universities and researchers. So we're very pleased to host this particular discussion. I'm going to ask each of our participants to introduce themselves briefly now. I'll start with Laura. Go for it, Laura.
I have to make sure I'm really good at keeping my mic on mute. I'm Laura Falvo. I'm a resident of Sudbury, Ontario, lived here my whole life. I've been in the childcare field for 33 plus years. I've been at the school for, I celebrated my 30th year at the school. And we have a wonderful Montessori school. It's a gem in Sudbury, Ontario. And welcome everyone to our discussion.
Okay, we'll stick to Sudbury. Vani, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is Avani. I'm a parent. My daughter goes to Sudbury Montessori, and I'm a big fan of Montessori. We're gonna have lots of talk about it in a few minutes once there will be question answer session.
Monique.
Hi everyone, my name is Monique Soma. I'm an assistant professor at Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, and I did some work on this with Laura and her team at Sudbury Montessori in the area of inclusion, and that's what I study and do my research and teaching on at Brock.
And Sarah.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sarah Enright. I'm the interim executive director for the Canadian Council of Montessori Administrators. I have been in Montessori for over 20 years, and the CCMA is an overseeing body that looks at Montessori across Canada and works with schools on ensuring that the classrooms and the schools are following Montessori pedagogy. And I'm very happy to be here. So thank you, Gordon, for inviting me to join this beautiful panel. And I'm very excited to talk about the research that has been done. So thank you so much.
Okay, so let me just start with a very brief discussion about why we come to have this session tonight. A few years ago, I was contacted by Laura, who's head of the Montessori School in Sudbury, to do some training and discussion with her staff about inclusion. And we had a great session. I enjoyed it, and she said it was successful. And the conversation that we had following the session was that it would be really interesting for Laura and her staff to engage in a process over some time to look at how inclusion could work effectively and be supported enhanced, improved within her school. And she was very anxious to do that. And so we looked for some partners, and we received some financial support from Community Living Ontario. We had some resources from Inclusive Education Canada, and we talked to people at several universities in Ontario, but finally located our partnership with Brock University in St. Catharines. And Monique and several graduate students, doctoral students from Brock signed on to work on the project. They in turn found some money within Brock resources, and Monique showed initiative and applied for a grant from the federal government to help supplement what we already had. And Monique and her team carried out a project over a couple of years. It was certainly affected by the pandemic, but it was able to sustain itself in any event. And the result was the work that they were able to do, the folks from Brock with Laura and her staff. And that was put together in a report that hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at. It's posted on the Inclusive Education Canada website. There it is. Monique's holding it up. And it's one of the things that will guide our discussion tonight. So subsequent to that, and actually during the course of the last year, I reached out to the Canadian Council of Montessori Administrators and talked to Sarah and her predecessor about building on this work to see if Inclusion and Inclusive Education Canada could team up and partner with Montessori educators to just explore how we might help each other forward to serve parents and families in our country. And my own experience is that many parents of children with disabilities are drawn to Montessori education because of the focus that it has on individuals and personalized learning and use of concrete materials, and all of those things cause many parents to be optimistic about what their child can achieve in a Montessori setting. And I think that there have been many, many successes. But what this project was about is how can we join what's been learned in the last few years about inclusive education practices that might be able to be melded with the excellent Montessori principles and practices that are in those schools every day. How can we join the two together and strengthen what is already a really good program? So that's really what this initiative is about. And the folks who are here on the panel with me tonight are going to share with you their perspectives on this. And with that, I'm going to turn first to Laura. And Laura, can you just give us a bit of a sense of where you were when you called me up a few years ago and said, this inclusive education question and the challenges go with it, thinking that I might have some training for my staff that would be useful. What was happening? What were your thoughts, and what was your perspective on inclusion and Montessori methods at that time?
Mute. So, I mean, with the principles of Maria Montessori, it was a lot of her work was based on working with children with exceptionalities, and a lot of the materials were developed in enabling children, all children, to be able to manipulate the materials. And in our community, we do have a high autism rate. We've had many children that have exceptionalities, and we want to accept everyone into the Montessori family. So I'm very passionate about it. we have staff, some staff, we've had to come on board to follow through on having children in the program. But I just felt that there was a real need to be opening our classrooms to the children that have exceptionalities, and I mean all exceptionalities, right? So, we have children that have, high IQs, who are able at young ages to, explore materials that maybe a 5 or a 6-year-old might be using. And then, having children with lesser abilities still in the same classroom with those children, which is one of the benefits of having Montessori, having the 3 age groups all together. So, you see the younger children helping the older children. And that's why I reached out and thought this would be something. I still think there's a lot of fun things that can happen, and a lot of more work that can be done with it, especially with the Montessori materials, and developing possibly some new Montessori materials to aid in the program, following obviously the principles of Montessori. So that was my original reach out and seeing where we could go with that. And then,
so Laura, just following up on that, how would you describe, like, where do the critical edges appear between the teacher's ongoing efforts to use Montessori methods and what a child with a disability, whether autism or intellectual disability, brings to the experience? Like, is it not being able to manipulate certain materials in anticipated ways? Is it making accommodations? Where is the edges of the two ideas of Montessori methods and inclusion kind of?
Okay. So for example, obviously, I'll do a practical life exercise. So if we did something as simple as glass polishing, so there might be 15 steps to do the glass polishing on their own, where we would have accommodation for maybe, students that might only be able to maybe, work on 6 steps of the 15 steps of the work itself, right? And, the teachers, right, they always want to ensure that the children are like going through the 16 steps, right? So it's a learning process, right? So it's okay if we're only doing the 6 steps. We might do 6 steps for 2 weeks, and then maybe we're going from 6 to 10 steps until, you just keep building and building until they get to that point of 16 steps, or they might not even get to that point of 16 steps. So, and trying to give the students as much freedom of choice, and also give them, just the ability to have the option of choosing specific materials that they might not be able to have in a regular traditional school. But Montessori offers so many wonderful exercises and materials that are, like you had mentioned previously, hands-on, which is awesome for a child with special exceptionalities, that, holding things and, having that little bit extra, right?
So it's how much the task needs to be accommodated to the child and how to go about it. Is that the challenge that your teachers face every day and have to figure out how to do effectively?
I would say yes. That's my opinion, but yes, I would find that being one of the major challenges to completing the steps to complete the exercises. Okay,
let's turn to Monique next here. Monique, you the first part of your effort. First, just to acknowledge, you've had your own personal experience with Montessori education, right? your children attended Montessori schools, so you've been a parent in
Yes.
that. Obviously, felt it was a good option for your children. When you entered this project, what were the initial steps that you took to figure out how you might be of help to Laura and her teachers?
Okay, thanks, Gordon, and thanks, Laura, because you really touched on a lot of things that I might expand on or that I was thinking about as well. We had, we feel like we were part of the same team for so long that, I kind of know what Laura is thinking about different things, so which is really nice, part of the partnership that we had. So I did have some background in Montessori, but my background was not in early childhood. So we did have a couple members on our team that had an early childhood expertise. My training was K-6, which isn't quite early childhood, even though it overlaps a tiny bit. So I brought the special education, inclusive education piece, and my partners had an expertise in one of my research assistants was a Montessori trained educator, and one of the other partners was a faculty member who also had a background in early training and background in early childhood education. So that really helped to recognize the unique needs of educators working with really young children in a structured school setting, and also to bring in the perspective of the Montessori method. So I did have quite a bit of understanding about it and did some learning over the years. So I felt pretty confident in that, but I never practiced it myself. So I couldn't say, well, why don't you just do this? Because it wasn't in my, I never had done that myself. So what we did initially was we went in to see. So we made a visit before we even talked about or had any ideas about what the project was going to look like or what the support was going to look like. And we went and we did a visit, and we met with Laura and we met with the team, and we just looked around the school and we took some pictures just so that we could remember some of the things that we saw. And we just did like a really, really informal, it wasn't really an assessment because we weren't really judging or assessing. We were just kind of looking. And we spent some time in the classroom. We interacted with some of the children and got to kind of see what it was like, a day in the life at Sudbury Montessori. And then from there, we got some ideas about where things might go. So with conversations with Laura and the other staff, just informal conversations. So we decided that it would be really important to do two things. To get a chance to really talk to the teachers about where they were at as far as their views on inclusion and their comfort levels. So two things, we were looking at attitudes and perceptions, and we were also looking at their perceived competency. So how did they feel that they were able to implement something or work with a child with special needs or meet students' needs, all of these little pieces that are really, really important. Because if educators don't feel that they feel competent or they feel that they have the confidence to do that, then we can't really expect them to be able to do some of the things like Laura was saying, accommodate or modify a task, right? That's way over here. So we had to figure out where they were at so that we could meet them where they were at. And so we did a focus group with a couple focus groups with the educators, and we also provided a little bit of professional development in the session. So every time we were able to go and visit, we tried to also do something interactive and learning with the staff as well. And we also looked at, we did the early childhood special link environmental survey at the site as well. And so Laura helped to complete that. And so we just looked at a lot of the policies and procedures that were in place were already meeting the expectations of an inclusive school. There were some things that obviously aren't always in our control, such as physical structures and things like that. But there were some things that we were able to offer suggestions around, some enhancements that could have supported the program better. which I've been following the Sudbury Montessori School on Facebook. So I get to see pictures of all of these amazing enhancements that they're doing to the schoolyard and to the gym and all of these things, which is really, really exciting. So what we did from the information we gathered was we looked at what are the things that they feel that they want to learn about, because we asked them, and where are they at as far as mindset for inclusion or for supporting students with exceptionalities. And so from there, we developed a few modules. We developed 6 modules, actually. And some of our modules shifted and changed as we moved along, because the idea was that we would be working from where the staff was at that moment. And the way that the modules were set up, sorry about that. The way that the modules were set up they were designed in a way that there was a topic of focus where the staff did some learning. So there was a learning piece, and then there was an action piece. So from the learning, we provided them with a prompt to challenge them to implement some of the learning that they had done, they had engaged in. And then the final piece was the reflect piece. So then after they had engaged in the action piece, then they could reflect on what it was they had learned and make those connections. And from that reflect piece, we could then see, or is there still more work to do here? Or are we ready to kind of move forward? And that was really the data that we collected was that reflect piece, because that was helping us to understand where the staff were at and where maybe there were some gaps that we needed to still try to kind of fill in and meet the needs. And so if you looked at the report on page 6, it outlines the 6 modules. The first module was just what is inclusion. So it was really broad, and we really talked about attitudes and beliefs. One of the issues that came up, that always comes up in any groups of educators that I work with, is behavior. So behaviors always seems to be something very challenging. We actually kind of touched on behavior at two different points in time, because it was so prominent in their discussions. So the third module was looked at attitudes and belief systems. And we thought that we would do behavior first, because that was what they were really concerned about. And then we would kind of move into kind of unpacking some of these other things related to the attitudes and beliefs about why do I think the way I think about the work that I do, because it goes back really far. And a lot of times we don't even recognize why we're thinking the way we're thinking about things. And then we tried to provide a lot of strategies through thinking about universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. And what does that look like in the context of a Montessori school? So Laura gave a really good example about the polishing task. So maybe it's only 6 steps. So maybe we change that. And that can be okay, because we're still following the philosophy of Maria Montessori in the way the tasks are set up and the way the tasks are achieved and accomplished and completed. However, maybe for a child, it doesn't look the same as it looks the way we might think in a linear way. So getting the teachers to kind of think about their practice in a different way. Module 5 was supposed to be an in-person module. We were going to have an opportunity to look at programming and planning more closely in teams, which wasn't possible because it was right in the middle of COVID. So we did a focus on autism spectrum disorder, and that was pretty well received by the staff as well as like a supplement. And when we did that module, we recognized that that was actually really, really important to cover as well. And the last module was a workshop, and it was hands-on. And our original plan, as Laura knows, was to come and try to do some accommodations and modifications with some Montessori materials that we're using or we would like to use, and how can we make modifications to them and change them or alter them. I don't mean change them, but alter them slightly to make them more accessible for specific students that the teachers were working with. And because we were not able to do that, we designed a series of 4 workshops where they were able to create some hands-on materials and tools for them to use in their classrooms that would allow their classrooms to be more welcoming and inclusive by having these materials and these resources to implement with the students right at the ready, right? So we gave them a working session basically where they could kind of create some things that they would be able to use with some of the students that had different exceptionalities. Yeah, Laura's showing a picture there.
I'm showing our COVID module. You can
yes, that was our COVID module, and it worked out really well. We did it over Zoom. And the staff were super engaged, and they were working in their teaching teams. And my research assistant and I sat down the one day we had got all the materials and supplies, and we created packages, and we sent all the packages. So there were Ziploc baggies with everything they needed in them. And they were able to create things like using some pick symbols, which we spoke about in one of our sessions, but they wouldn't have had access to even have the time to create those resources on their own. So we created some samples to show them how they could use them to enhance what they were already doing. They were able to create a lanyard to perhaps use with a child that needed some communication assistance. And they created some sensory things because, one of the big foci when we talked about the ASD module was the focus on sensory and that being so important. And so we were able to implement those things through that module. Yeah, so that's what we did. It was a lot of fun. Okay,
Thank you. Now, I think we'll turn to Avani, whose child. I don't know a lot about your situation, Avani. Is it a son or a daughter?
She's my daughter.
Okay. And how old is she?
She will be 5 in December.
Okay. So what's been your experience with Montessori education?
Yes. So where should I start? I am really I really get good benefits from Montessori for my child. When we started for her 1 year ago, she was having difficulty with the routines and the behaviors, as Monique mentioned. And that kind, the special needs kids require a little bit of routine. They learn the things, but they learn a little bit differently. That's the main idea behind it. So that environment with the specialized one-on-one teaching at the school, at the Montessori, provided her and us too really good benefit from the education system, I would say. We gained lots of improvements in all the aspects, starting from going to the school, because before she goes to Montessori, she was used to go to the daycare, and she literally hates it there. She did not like it there. I don't know what was the reason, but from the day one, she always says, I would like to go to Montessori. So that's my half of the work is done. She says, if my child says, I want to go to school, and with a happy face and ready to be done. So that's very happy message for me. We are very happy about it, that she likes it there. About the education wise and the curriculum wise, Montessori worked with her needs. Actually, I would say that. Her teacher, Miss Danica, she is really good mentor for her, and she's a really good leader. Whatever I had concerns about my daughter, I just presented them, frequent meetings with them and with other educators. They have like all the things placed in the process. So and one, like my rapport with them is very like, we always like communicate that how's going on things with my daughter and everything. So they update me if something happens. If I have some concerns, I update them, and they work on it. Like very next day I see those things are implemented. So what made us to go through the Montessori was initially that if my child is a special need kid, if she goes to the other kid which are the same needs, which are having the same needs, she's not going to learn much from them. Like everybody, I'm not like saying that it will not be good environment, but child learns most of the things through imitation. They see the things and then they learn by themselves.
So seeing children being in school with
seeing
a
other
variety
children.
of children.
Yeah, seeing other children, that what Michaela is doing or what John is doing, like, let me try that one. So that was the biggest thought process in our mind, like me and my husband thought about it. And Miss Laura was really supportive. She's like, yeah, whatever you need, we can have that for my daughter. And that actually worked out really well for us. And so those are the things, like specialized education, kind of like one-on-one touch with my kid, like what is her need, what is her problem, what are her concerns, what is our concerns. They all get kind of like addressed at Montessori. And I just asked Miss Laura one other day that when are they starting grade 1? Because if they are starting, we really love to be a part of it, because my daughter learns so many things. Now I see 1 year back my daughter, and now it's a really major difference. Like she's really gaining lots of stuff. So we are happy about it.
How do you see the importance of linking Montessori practices with inclusion at the same time? Do you see that as important and vital?
Well, yes, as Monique said, like that they were not able to carry out some of the programs due to COVID, and whatever modules she mentioned, if given a chance within Montessori now, like having the situation a little bit better, we would love to. That will really help any special education kid or any kid in general to grow. So because they are all kind of like, as I mentioned, special needs kids, they learn most of the stuff. Like Arvi knows how to do addition and she can make 200 spellings, but they learn it differently. That's the only thing. So if we find that different piece, like they may require more support at like understanding certain things. So if we incorporate that with the inclusion and Montessori, that will be really great idea. Like that will really work out well for the any kid who needs like a special support or special assistance.
Okay, so I think it's time we turn to our Montessori expert here on our panel, Sarah. Sarah, what intrigues or what interests you and your colleagues more generally in the Montessori education movement about melding effectively these two things, Montessori practices and philosophy, and inclusion as a guiding principle of education?
Well, first off, I do not claim to be a Montessori expert. There's a lot of people on the panel who are much more of an expert than I. There's a lot of attendees that I can see that are also experts. But I think this is near and dear to our hearts, because this is actually where Montessori education began. Montessori really wanted to create an educational system where all children were able to meet their highest potential, regardless of any abilities that they had. And that is really where the basis of Montessori pedagogy comes from, is meeting the needs of individual children, tailoring programs to every single learner on how they best receive information and how they learn and how they are going to progress in their own manner. Every child is unique and different. And so I think, this work was particularly interesting to me and to a number of my colleagues. Everything that Laura has said, everything that Monique has said, really resonates. The way that it was approached, that it was looking at what the needs of the teachers were. So to me, it was also a very Montessori approach on how to support the teachers. It almost felt like it was Montessori for adults, where the teachers were a part of building what did they need, what areas did they find that they were lacking and that they needed some extra supports. The Montessori materials are designed so that they are multisensory, so that they should be able to appeal to children of different learning styles or different learning needs. But as teachers, I think Laura and Monique both touched on it, that there's only so much time that teachers have to design or create or be creative in different usages of the materials. And a lot of times, having some outside help with people who have more focus in particular needs would really help teachers come a long way. I was excited to see that it is everything from looking at the design and how we can make the design of classrooms, and not just classrooms, but the whole school spaces, indoor and outdoor, hallways, doorways, washroom facilities. So looking at it at a grander picture. Most Montessori schools started from, a teacher who has a passion in early childhood education and somehow got thrust into an administrative position, even though they are trained as a teacher. And, the training that we get on different thinking children and different needs of children, it's incorporated into our training, but it's not enough. And really, most administrative staff go into it as a teacher. And so, looking at the study and reading through the document that had been produced, it's quite exciting that there can be a partnership so that we can move forward. This is something that is a huge need in Canada right now. Children are not being served at their best capacity at the moment. And we need to find something that we can do to support more children and families, because a child is a part of a family unit. And so it isn't just a child on their own, it's how can we support the full family and be that partner with the parents and the child, and even extended family for a lot of young children as well. And so I think there's a huge opportunity here for us to continue looking at how we can support children and families better. What can we do to take this to the next level? How can we support our teachers? Montessori teachers, like all teachers who deal with young children, have a passion for helping children. And the more tools that they have in their toolbox, the better they can then create classrooms that can be more inclusive for different learners. I think one of the key pieces of a Montessori classroom that is really important is actually what Avani touched on, and that's that children are learning from each other. And the beauty of a Montessori classroom, by having a 3-year age mix together, that gives children the opportunity to be working with other children at their level of capability, not their age level. We all know that if we take a group of 3-year-olds, they're also unique and individual, and they're not doing the same thing at the same time. And so having those age mixes together, you can have some great role modeling of children of different levels or different ability levels. And so children are able to learn from each other, and children are able to help each other. And children who are learning in a different way also can put forward their knowledge, and they can be celebrated for their unique gifts that they are giving back to the other students in the class as well. And so it's a win on everybody's side, because everybody can learn from each other, and everybody can continue to grow, and they can have a great experience with different children and have good role models from their classmates.
I have a great example even today. Miss Danica, who happens to be Avani's daughter's teacher, she came down and she was so excited. She says, "Oh, I have to tell you this story." And she says, this little one was having a complete meltdown, and she said, I suggested to one of the students who likes to help in the classroom, and said, why don't you see if you could go and So the little student went over and rubbed his back and said, why don't we go and clean up your work? So jumped up, no problem, held her hand. They went over and cleaned up the work together. She said it was just like, heartwarming, right? You see, how even the students are helping those children that have exceptionalities, and they are the prizes in the classroom. The kids all love them. It's like when they come to school, it's like, oh, look who's here today. When her daughter comes to school every day, and today I brought her up to the classroom, and she has her little friends just staring at the door going, oh, look, she's here today. And it is quite warming when you see all of that, come to life in the classroom. And we're very fortunate in Sudbury. We have a great partnership with Child and Community Resources. So we do have a staff member, an extra staff member, so that all the staff members that are in the classroom all work with the children that have exceptionalities. So it's not just a one-on-one with one specific person. It's everybody taking turns working with all the children, in the classroom all together. And we're very fortunate here in Sudbury that we do get that support in our community. And we are here for our families. So the communication is amazing. Avani can say, oh, I have this report. This is, a goal for her. And yeah, we're on it. So it's like, we're incorporating it for all, the children that need that extra help. So, yeah.
I think this the peer support that you just talked about is one of the real critical advantages of inclusive education. And one of the problems we have is that sometimes people think that children in school only learn from their teachers. And the truth is they learn as much or more, probably much more, from each other than they do from teachers. And we need to open up that avenue, and inclusion is a way to do it, whether it's a Montessori school or any other kind of school. Now, I've read a section here in the report that I would like to put to our Montessori educators and to Monique, if I could. And it's been discussed already to some extent, but I think it's framed really quite clearly here in this, what I'm just going to read from the report. And that is when Monique and her colleagues wrote that teachers' attitudes towards inclusion were generally positive, but that they really had concerns about the practical implications of moving a child through the tasks to a mastery level, and expressed concerns with moving a child to the next task or class if they hadn't mastered the previous curriculum. So it seems to me that that's a problem that every teacher has. And I wonder if Monique, you could speak a little more to that, and then maybe Sarah and Laura.
Okay, sure. So one of the things, that was one of the big underlying ideas that came out of the first focus group. When we did the second focus group at the end of the sessions, and that took us about like a year and a bit because of COVID, there was quite a break. So they had a lot of time to kind of like reflect and think and try things out and move forward. So we did see changes in that idea. And some of the things that I think sometimes what we need to do, because we see this in public education all the time. And I think what we need to do is we need to give educators permission to make those accommodations that are needed. And sometimes it's about helping them to think about the purpose of the learning in a different way. Because the Montessori method itself, as Sarah mentioned and Laura talked about it as well, is so nicely designed to meet the needs of any child, no matter what. But I think that when we're focused on teaching a method in a linear way, so step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then we move to the next, and education is like that a lot, all education. And we get stuck that that's only the way, there's only that way to do it. And if I'm not doing it that way, then I might not be meeting the expectations, or might not be doing it right. And so I think part of what we tried to do was help the educators recognize their autonomy to be able to make those decisions based on the individual needs of the students. Because at the end, we had educators saying, not at the necessarily at the very end, but like at the end of a module where they were talking about, I tried this, they were saying things like, you know, I recognize that the student really likes to do a certain task, so I'm going to try and use that to teach them other things that aren't necessarily related to that task. So they were then thinking about the strengths and the skills that the child was already bringing to be able to use that as a springboard for something that maybe they didn't think was related, but they were thinking, how can I make it related? And that meant kind of making some little alterations to what they might have done for another child, and feeling that that was okay to do that. And that was part of it, right? It was that permission.
Right.
I didn't give them permission, but I think we helped them to see that it was okay. It's okay to make those accommodations. And
It's okay for them to give themselves permission.
Yeah, they have to give themselves permission. It's about what is the end, what is the end goal? Not necessarily, like, the steps to get there are really important. I don't want to discredit the steps to get there, but it doesn't always have to be, like I said, linear. It could be presented and demonstrated in a way that's a little bit different, and that's okay.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think Monique hit a number of really key points. And I think the one that stands out to me is that, our world is all about the end result. It's about the product. It's about what the ending is. And the actual essence of Montessori is about process, not product. And I think a lot of teachers feel stress and pressure of that, each piece of material is supposed to have an outcome, and how do we get the child to that outcome, rather than understanding that the learning is not the end, it's the journey. And I think that we are in a society where it is all about, have you checked off the right boxes, and have you accomplished X, Y, and Z, so that you can then move on to the next thing. And I think that's really a difficulty that the teachers need, that reassurance that it's okay not to be the next and the next and the next, and you have to check off the boxes. You can go there in a different route and a different direction, and that's okay. And then I also think that, we forget that the learning that comes out of the material, we don't know what that learning is, because it's unique and individual to every child. And our assumptions that the child is supposed to get something from this material, they may be getting something else, but it may be more important than what we were hoping for that material, because they may need something else that they are desiring at that time. And so I think it is, like Monique had mentioned, it's giving permissions to the teachers to not think of the end result, and for the parents to be comfortable of not the end result, and administrative staff to also understand that it is about the process, it's not the end result. And there's always that pressure of the child moving to the next school or the next class. Will they have the skill sets that are necessary for them to be successful in the next stage? And if they do not, where does the blame fall for that? And I think there's a lot of that, the teachers not wanting to feel like it was their responsibility, or that they didn't do their job, or they didn't move the child along the continuum that would be expected for the outcomes. And so I think definitely giving permissions to the teachers to step back and let the child take the journey that they are on, and that each journey is supposed to be honored. I think that's a big important piece here.
The concept that's been very, very useful for me in reflecting on what we're talking about is the idea of partial participation, that not everybody has to do 100% of a task or activity in order to benefit from doing some of it. And I think if this is part of the breaking down the rigidity of curriculum and making it more accommodated to individuals, is to recognize that there is value, there is positive experience that can come from doing some of something rather than doing all of it. And of course, parents of kids with disabilities have always feared that if their child can't accomplish a certain point in the progression, that they're going to be held there until they do. And some of the rhetoric in education, for example, in the United States, when they had this "No Child Left Behind" idea, I was working at a university across the border in Maine at the time, and teachers felt as if that meant that every child had to learn everything in the curriculum, or they would be leaving them behind. And of course, that never did work, and it was never feasible. But the idea that everybody has to master everything before they can move on. And of course, that's why traditionally we have kids repeating grades, and sometimes repeating 2 grades or 3 grades. And all of these things can be very harmful to children. And I think just respecting their individuality, which Montessori education does, is a big plus in this effort. Laura, you have a comment on this? And then I think we're going to open up here to questions. So any of you who have questions, please feel free to put them on the board, and we'll get to them in just a moment. Laura, final thought.
Final thought. I love how you stated that, Sarah, it's the journey. And I mean, I think what really helps with the parents and families that come into the Montessori classroom is having some great communication with the families as far as, what their expectations are and their goals for their children, so that we can work with the families and ensure that, everyone is able to accommodate and be able to get the parents and the children where, as best as we can when they're on their journey, at the Montessori school, right? So, and again, like you had mentioned about, Montessori is a great way of learning especially for children with special needs. So, it's like individual plans every day for every child who walks through the door. So it's not, a cookie cutter approach at all. And children are able to choose their work, differently all day long. And it's not the same when they come back the next day. So, and, that helps with their education journey. So, yeah.
Thank you, Laura. I have a question here. Let me put it to the panel. One of our participants says, is there a system in the Montessori world to ensure that the treatment that Avani has received for her child is also given to other parents? I know parents with children with learning differences who've had the opposite experience. And I'm assuming that is intended, that it's experience in Montessori schools. Although I'm inferring that. If that's the case, Sarah, maybe can you help us out?
Sure. Yes, I think we would all love for every child to have this experience. I think that, with hopefully some of the steps that we're looking at moving forward, this was a wonderful first step. Hopefully we are going to be moving forward, and our hope is that we'll be able to give more Montessori schools and more Montessori teachers some extra support so that all children can be more included in the classrooms. And so we definitely, would like to find ways to make this the norm and the standard, and not the exception to the rule, but make this this is what is the norm. This should be what is every day. Every child, every parent should be having this experience. And that is not happening. And that's why we're having this conversation right now, is because we need to do something about it. We need to take some action. And this study was, I think, the step one, and we are looking forward to doing step through 2 through 200 that needs to be done. So this is for every child. It is not just for one child or for one school. It needs to be across the board for all families and for all children. And so this is definitely the reason we're sitting here today.
So it's really a question of engaging with Montessori teachers and acting on the things that they identify as areas that they can be supported in.
Yes, and I think the extra modules, the extra, like the toolkits, helping teachers see different ways of using the material, those sorts of things, and the partnerships between the teachers and the parents and the teachers and with the school. I think all of these things that have been set in motion now with the study with Monique and Laura is a good starting point for us to bring more teachers on board and give them some more tools and to give them some of these permissions to follow the child some more and, really have more children be able to be included in a Montessori classroom.
And I just want to share something that came in as a comment from one of our participants named Barb, and it's an excellent improvement on my older language of partial participation. And Barb points out that the current replacement for that is valued role in learning, and I think that's very much an improvement. That participating in a valued way is what's really critical. It doesn't have to be the way other children do. Can be in a different manner. Another question says, where can we access the report? Monique?
So the
report. Where can people access it?
So the report's available on the Inclusive Education website, and you posted the link there, Gordon, but I think you put it just to the hosts and panelists. So I'm going to copy it to everyone and see if that makes a difference. Okay,
so the simple answer is you go to the Inclusive Education Canada website, which is www.inclusiveeducation.ca. It's right on the homepage. We just put it up there a couple of days ago. Someone says, I just want to compliment Laura and all the teachers at Montessori as they're always actively engaging participants when it comes to implementing goals, strategies, recommendations for children with exceptionalities into the Montessori curriculum. It's a pleasure collaborating with you and your staff. That's good to hear, I'm sure.
There's a question, Gordon, just because I opened the chat to post the link for Inclusive Education Canada, that asks about the Special Link Environmental Survey. So the Special Link Environmental Survey is, it's a Canadian survey that's used for early learning to examine inclusion and early learning programs. So maybe it's the Special Link Inclusion Survey and I'm saying it wrong, but I think that's what it is. So this was something that we included, that my colleague who is has the expertise in early childhood learning felt that this would be an important piece to implement. And we actually used it in one of our modules, and not all of it, but pieces of it, because it's quite lengthy. I was not trained to implement it, or to actually conduct the survey, but my research assistant graduate student was trained in it. So she was the one who did that piece. But we actually took pieces of it and actually asked the staff to do it so that they could kind of self-reflect on how inclusive their learning space was in their classroom. So that was really neat. But that was just, so are we talking about the same thing, Barb? Maybe we're talking about the same thing. It's special link. Do you have it there?
I have this. I know it's
yeah.
backwards, right? But I believe this is what we used, right, to
Yes.
do that. So it's the Special Link Early Childhood Inclusion Quality Scale. And the author was Sharon Hope Irwin.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah.
So I guess we're talking about the same thing, Barb. It's not something different. It's the same thing. But it looks, I think we called it an environmental survey from our perspective, because we were looking at examining the environment of the school and all of the pieces. So that's my mistake. I called it that, but I should have called it its actual correct name. And then you asked if the learning modules are available to others. So we don't have the learning modules anywhere right now. And the reason for that is because they were really designed with the needs of the Sudbury Montessori in mind. So we are looking at moving forward and trying to provide this type of thing for other schools. And that's kind of why we're here, and we've had conversations with Sarah and some other leaders in Montessori schools in Ontario. And I think in Canada too, that we spoke with someone in BC, didn't we, Gordon? Because we are reluctant to just release them as here modules, take them and go, because they were really focused on the needs identified by those teachers. We don't know that other schools would identify the same areas of need for growth and learning, and that we would want to tailor them. We're still working through that. So
Okay,
that'll be hopefully to come, right, Gordon?
Yes. Well, I'm going to say Inclusive Education Canada and Sarah's organization, the Canadian Council, it's Council, right? Canadian Council on Montessori Educators or Administrators. I'll get that right. We have agreed to form a partnership to explore how we can work together going forward. And we don't have too many concrete things yet, but we're exploring how the network of people that we have part of our inclusion movement can work with the network of people that are working in the Montessori movement and support each other in moving forward. I have a question here that links to that, which is the benefits that come from inclusion. And a parent writes in that she has an 8-year-old child with disabilities in a Montessori classroom in Ontario and wonders that while inclusive education is often framed according to its benefits for the disabled student, can anyone speak in more depth about the benefit of inclusion in Montessori environments for all students beyond increasing empathy in typically developing children? So beyond empathy, what are the positive aspects of inclusion for children who are in these classes with a child with special needs? Anybody want to address that?
I can start.
Monique's turned her mic on, so she's ready to talk.
So thank you for that question. This is one of the reasons why I was so interested and so passionate about becoming involved in this project, because I've done work with a lot of school-age students and educators teaching school-age students around the importance of creating inclusive environments. But one of the things that we believe is that it really needs to start before that. And so if we are we know that children are benefiting, they do at least the same or better in an inclusive setting. And we have lots of research that talks about school-age children, all the children. So we have the children that are being included, which I don't even really like to say that because they just belong there anyway. But that their outcomes are the same or better academically, socially, social emotionally. So it's not just about developing, skills for empathy, for example, but it's really about looking at seeing individuals as equal members of a contributing community. And that's really what the real world is. That's real life, right? So we want to see every classroom, including classrooms of really, really young children, to be an example of what real life looks like, so that these tiny humans are going to grow into large humans that are going to have an inclusive mindset, right? Because that's all that they've ever known, which is kind of what we want society to be. We want people in society to not be, judgmental. I do lots of work with adults and teachers that are, saying that I think inclusion's great, but when you break it down, they're really kind of stuck in some of the experiences that they've had themselves. And so we have to unlearn all kinds of things. But if we can get at them when they're really young and show them that this is just real life, they're already naturally inclusive by nature. Children are born inclusive. They don't see differences. They don't see anything. And so what we do, and I say adults and society, is we categorize people and we, say some can come and some can't come. And we create those barriers that exist. And then we teach them to be not inclusive rather than fostering this natural inclusivity. And that's why I was super excited to work with these teachers, because they're starting it right at the beginning of their experiences in education. And that's where we need to be if we're going to, make those significant changes in our society.
Yeah, anyone else? Well, just something that comes to my mind is the example that Laura used earlier. And I'm sure that the child who intervened and provided assistance to the youngster who was having a bit of a crisis benefited from that. And it was a learning experience that's beyond empathy. I mean, I think empathy actually involves learning and using a number of skills that are not simply feeling, but are precise skills that a child has to utilize and develop, which can occur. Now, we do have a question here, and Laura or Monique, perhaps you can address this. Somebody says, I'm wondering if there are one or two changes to the environment or to teacher practices that have been sustained by teachers as a result of this project. Are there one or two things that you could say are happening now in your school that weren't before, Laura, before the project?
So if you look at if you go through the project, they all still have designated table for children who want to get some of their frustrations out. I don't want, it's like an anger table. So they all have them in the classroom. They also have like a peace table also, right? So, I mean, they created that through, working with Monique and her team. Like I haven't taught for so long now, but, I wouldn't have thought of having an avenue for a child, to go to just, work out their frustrations, or, having sensory items just on a table, just because, they need some time just to focus on manipulating some materials outside of working in the classroom. So that definitely I know that exercise is still in the classroom. So
Monique, can you think of anything?
We do the lanyards, right? So language, we still have those.
For communication.
For communication. We have visual schedules.
These are things that you implemented or changed.
Well, the lanyards, we always fought hard about not having lanyards our resource consultant who's on the call, that was Miss Christina who gave us that little accolade. Thank you, Christina. And she could attest to this, that we were, a lot of the teachers were not wearing those lanyards. They were not going to have them. And, you know, we had seen them before, but you know, they weren't very apt to having them, and we use them. Like, it's a great tool. So it's funny, you know, once you start implementing different items into the classroom, it's like, oh, this is great. Like, you know, this is working so well. And it's not just with the special needs children either, it's with the regular students also, right? So it's not just because, you know, there's an exceptionality in the classroom. They're even using some of these materials with children that are, you know, just could use that benefit from it, right? So, you know, they've had the children even come up and play with their lanyards and like say, oh, you know, and yeah, so.
So we're running out of time. Vanny, final word from you. You're confident that inclusion is making a difference for your daughter?
Yes, it does indeed. And I will request whoever is on the line as a parent, I will encourage and then spray the words that Montessori is really a good education system. And especially if your child has special needs, it will really turn out really good. You have to believe me on that.
Okay, final word from you, Monique.
I just want to thank everyone for attending. We had a really good turnout, and hopefully there was some interesting discussion for you. And I see lots of comments. It looks like we have like partners all over the place, Gordon. So this is super exciting, and really the topics that we provided the professional development for. One of the big things, this is not like this is final words, but it's a little bit long-winded final words. One of the reasons why we felt it was so important, and one of the reasons why we were able to access the grant that I was able to access, was because there's not a lot of external or internal funding for early childhood educators to access professional development. So that was one of the reasons why I think we were able to do the work that we did, and why the educators and the staff were so committed to learning. We were giving them an opportunity to learn about things that they wanted to learn about and not have to go on and do the research themselves. Could they have gone and done the research themselves? Maybe, but it would have taken a lot more effort. And it was nice for us to be able to guide them in a direction and provide them with some resources and information to help them improve their practice. And Laura, I mean, identified like 4 or 5 different things that we worked on them with that were actually tangible things. But I believe that in some of the discussions that the educators were mentioning in the final focus group, and some of the pictures I've seen of things happening that you're documenting on your social media, they're thinking about the needs of, and what Avani mentioned with the experience with her child, they're thinking about things in a way that is more inclusive framework of mindset. And that's a really, really big piece. We need to be able to shift our thinking to be open. And sometimes that's unlearning some of the things that we believe.
Okay, Laura, we're running out of time. I want to give Sarah a final chance here, but did we give you a chance to make a final comment before I move to Sarah?
I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and Monique, it was an awesome collaboration. And Avani, I know you're taking some time away from your daughter tonight, and thank you for sharing your time with us also, because I know how precious that is. And I look forward to working with you, Sarah, and on our workshop that's coming up, and Monique and Gordon. And thank you everyone for all the positive remarks and about Montessori. If we could have Montessori in every place in the world, that would just be amazing. So I know Maria's looking down and smiling at least.
Well, Sarah, I guess the final word to you. I know what we're hoping for is that every Montessori program in Canada will be really successful with inclusion. And that's a good start for parents of kids with special needs who attend them. And I think it's a good example to set for other kinds of early childhood education and schools. If Montessori schools can make adaptations and accommodations to really be successful, then it sets a standard for others. So what are your thoughts as we take this initial effort and try to extend it in a much more thorough way throughout our two movements?
Well, first, I'd just like to thank Laura, because I think that Laura reaching out to you to start this whole process is amazing. And it takes somebody who is bold and somebody who is going to make a huge difference in the world. So Laura, thank you for starting that process. Monique, thank you for jumping on board. Montessori is such a small little niche educational system, and we are trying to bring it more to the forefront. And the way that we do that is by partnering with people who have expertise in different areas. And so, Gordon, I want to thank you as well, because I think partnering with you and your expertise, we can take this study and now let's see if we can do it on a grander, larger scale so that all Montessori teachers have access. Looking in the chat, there's been a number of Montessori teachers who keep saying, how do I get access to this? How can I get my hands on this material or this thing? And so there's definitely a huge need in the Montessori community of teachers for more services and access that they can have for bringing inclusion into their classroom. And so I definitely see that our next steps are going to be a stronger partnership. I am hoping to take this study and see what we can do to extend it to more schools. We are excited that the Canadian Council of Montessori Administrators, we are hosting a inclusion workshop conference day in a couple of weeks. I'm actually very excited to see in our attendees tonight that a number of our presenters who will be at that conference are actually here tonight listening today. And so it's exciting that we are bringing in different groups, and excited to see some of the partnerships from the United States that are joining as well. And so I think this is a great start for us to start getting the word out there more, to start sharing our resources, because their resources are there. It's just a matter of getting them into the right hands of the right people, and then getting them into the laps of the children, which is really what this is all about, is making the lives of children and their families better. And so I think this is a great step, and I'm very excited to see what's going to come after this. So thank you, Gordon, for partnering with CCMA, and we're looking forward to a long relationship.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you for people that have tuned in. The session is recorded and it will be posted on the Inclusive Education Canada website for people to view if they weren't able to take part tonight. So thank you. And with that, good night.